Crafting in ARA History Untold is fundamental. Without crafting, well, the whole game would just collapse, and there are hundreds of items you can craft. So, of course, the question is, which items are more important than others, and which items I can put on the back burner. You see right now on the right side all the items in ARA History Untold which are be produced in the factory. That's what I want to focus on. By the way, if you don't see an item here, that means you have not researched it, have skipped it, or, well, you might want to upgrade your workshop because the workshop cannot craft all the items. The same goes for the guild, and the factory then, of course, can craft the items. But before we jump into this list, I have to make something very clear here. This is not a tier list. Remember when I made a tier list about the leaders and a lot of people were not really happy with that? Well, you probably also know that I was against the tier list because I think that tier lists and those type of games do not really help at all. And the same goes with items. Putting items into a tier list is pretty useless because I do not know what you are going through in your playthrough right now. Like, do you need food? Do you need production? Do you need science? What do you need? Right? So you have to check that for yourself, and you have to make sure that you actually produce the items which would really help you out. But I still want to take a look at the items from a perspective of neutrality. And what that means is I assume that you don't have a specific need for an item. You're basically at zero for everything. And this is just a neutral view on the item and how it would work in certain environments. And then you have to decide for yourself, is this item helping me in this particular moment or not? So let's go through the list. Also, I have absolutely zero clue how those items are being organized. I first thought it was ABC, right? The alphabet. No, it isn't. It clearly isn't. It's also not the amount you are producing. It's also not how much you have already. It's not when you unlock those items. I think they're just throwing them in there whenever they have an item. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. So with that said, let's jump into it. First, we have the indoor stove. And this is being used in dwellings. Gives you 3 city health, which is already pretty decent. But as an amenity, it gives you 15 city health, 1 bonus food fertility in all region in the city, and 15 city happiness. The indoor stove, in my opinion, is one of the best items in the game. The moment you have the ability to craft this, do it. Because those perks are already great, right? The same goes for the housing. They're great. But the 1+ bonus food fertility in all regions is just absolutely insane. And I would say the indoor stove is one of the must-have items in the game, especially when you always need that much food, right? Eyeglasses. They only work as an amenity, and they give you 2 bonus research per turn for each science improvement in the city, and 1 bonus production per turn for each industry improvement in the city. Pretty good. Do not underestimate that, especially if you have a city with a lot of production, like this one here. You can see right here I have an 80 production. So if I would put that here right now, the moment I find it, there it is, bam, 118. That's quite a bit. So use the eyeglasses, try to get them when you can, and use them in cities where you have quite a bit of production and research. Do not underestimate this. This can be really helpful. The industrial tools, they are must-have because they are basically the upgrade from the metal tools. And by the way, speaking of tools, let's do that. The lithic tools are, by the way, gone. So there's not every tool here in the game. But basically, whenever you are unlocking a tool, you want that. What I will say, though, when it comes to the metal tools, is produce a lot. Metal tools never go out of fashion. The lithic tools will be replaced by the metal tools. And if you use the industrial tools, you will replace the metal tools when it comes to the supplies, right? But with that said, you will always need metal tools to build buildings, and you will need a lot of them later on. Like some of the buildings take 20, 30 metal tools, so you want to have quite a bit of them and not run out. Like they never go out of fashion, so make sure to have the metal tools ready. Plastic container. This is an upgrade from the good old barrel, right? And I think the vase, I think is another is the pre thing of the barrel. Um, so this is a little bit weird. You don't really need the plastic container. Like the plastic container is actually kind of useless because you get it really late in the game. And when you look at the barrel, you will realize that the barrel can also be used in all the same buildings as the plastic container and even more. And they give you the self craft, the same, not the self, lol, the same craft production. You're not getting more out of it. So this is why I'm not producing any of the plastic container. Barrels are just better. But get the barrels. The barrels are good. You want the barrels, right? Next, air conditioner can be used in residence and skyscraper, and they can also be used as an amenity. And they are right. I love to put them into houses because the 5 plus city health plus 5 city happiness is really, really good. As an amenity, there are some items which bring a little bit more to the table, right? We have already talked about the indoor stove. And if you are still working for some of the slots at that point, like the air conditioner is coming in pretty late. It's a decent item. I'm not saying not to get it. If you have the resources, if you have production open, get some, put them in your houses. People will be happy. Your city will be happy. And they're good for that as an amenity. If you have a slot open, sure, but I think there are better items which can be used as an amenity. Then we have the machine parts. You will need quite a bit of them for construction, and also you need them in certain supplies. So, yes, this is one of those items which you definitely want, and the machine part is an upgrade to the gear and the rope. Now, the weird part here is none of the items ever go out of fashion, and as you can see here in the factory, you start with a rope, then you can use the gear, but weirdly enough, you cannot use the machine part here. So the gear itself never goes out of fashion. The rope, much more. Like the rope at some point becomes relatively useless, right? You can see it right here. You don't need it for any of the units, and you need it only in a few supply items. Oh no! I just realized they're not being used at all for anything. I'm an idiot. Okay. Machine parts. They are really important. You want them. You need them. You need them for a lot of construction buildings. You need them also for the fridges. And then you also need them for supplies in certain buildings like the vehicle factory, power plant, and so on and so forth. And you might think this is an upgrade to the gear, and that's not quite wrong, but it's also not quite true because the gear always stays in fashion. You will always need the gear. So please don't stop producing the gear just because you get the machine part, right? You can see that immediately when you were just looking at it. The gear is an upgrade to the rope, right? So you definitely want to move at some point from the rope completely to the gear, and then you don't need the rope anymore if you're not producing any of the units, which is happening around the end of Act 2. So the rope is then going completely out of fashion when you don't need them anymore, and then it will be replaced by the gear. But even though the machine part, at least in my opinion, is an upgrade of the gear, it will not replace the gear, right? We already have established that with some of the items that there might be upgrades to something, but they will not replace said item. The next thing is the clock. Pretty simple. You need city knowledge, right? and you want to get the bonus health when mustering begins in this city, you want to put at least a clock in one of the cities or multiple cities where you are training your units. And it's not a super must have, like the 10% is doing less than you might imagine, but it's a nice thing to have, right? You just take the advantage. Why wouldn't you? So if you have the parts already to produce clocks, then you can do it. If you don't do it like I did, it will not break your game, right? You will not lose your game because you have not used the clock. That's as simple as that. Then we have plastic. Yes, yes, plastic is coming really late. Keep that in mind. But the moment you get plastic, you want plastic. You see where plastic is going into, what you also needed for construction and for training. So, yes, plastic is one of those must have resources. The moment you can research it, you should. The moment you can start production, you definitely should. Fridges, they're really nice. They come pretty late. I like to put them into city dwellings because 50 city food in a dwelling is really, really nice. It's really nice. As an amenity, it's okay. It's okay. There are items which can get you similar results, but as a supply, this thing is just fantastic. But it comes pretty late in the game. Like a lot of the time, you could argue you don't need that anymore, right? Internal combustion engine, yes, you definitely want that. You can see that this is being used in a lot of military units, all the airplanes, and I think all the ships starting in the industrial age. So you want to get that. Right. And you also want to use it then later on for the vehicle factory so you can get the tractor and the cars, which you also need. So this is another very important in-between items you will use in a lot of military units and you will also use to craft more stuff. The microwave oven. This thing is weird. I would say it is not worth it. Yes, 10% of your build production is going towards food production improvements in the city. And that's not too bad, right? Like that in itself is really good. But most of the time, when you reach the moment you can actually use the microwave oven, you have reached the point where your cities are already pretty big, where you have already gotten everything out of a city you want, and you don't really need necessarily a city to grow anymore. And you're like, okay, what's the point in that? It's because it's coming really late. If this thing would be another item and would be available much sooner to you, I would say get it. Right? I would say immediately get that. That's amazing. Unfortunately, the timing when you get the microwave oven is just super late. And that's the biggest problem of this item. But if they would transform it into something else and you could get it in the middle of Act 2, holy moly, I would definitely say yes, get that. Glass. So this is interesting. You might be confused by this because you're like, wait, glass? No, there's something wrong here, right? Like glass is exclusive at the ceramic shop. No, and yes, it will be for most of the time, but the moment you get factories, you can produce glass in the factory, and you should. Because keep in mind that ceramic shops have a limit, factories do not. So you want to move all the glass production, which is really important. You need glass. You need always glass. The moment you start to be able to produce glass, you want that, and you will keep it through the whole game. It will never stop to be important. So when you can move glass to factories, put it into factories and let the ceramic shops produce something else like toilets, right? Like toilets are great. But yeah, change that the moment you can. The radio. The points you're getting from the radio are meh. They're not great, neither as a supply nor as an amenity. And more importantly, you can replace the radio very quickly with the TV. Yep. You can actually put in the TV or gaming console very quickly. Like the radio, for what it provides, always comes a little bit late in my opinion. Right? So yeah, weird. The wheel. I think the wheel is actually the upgrade to the gear sometimes. Look, the wheel is in the ballpark of the machine parts, ropes, and gear. You want the wheel at the beginning, especially because you can build carriages, which are really dope. Like you want that. And you also need it in a lot of buildings as supply. So get some wheels, but at some point, at the end of Act 2, the latest, you don't need wheels anymore. I would even go so far to say that in the middle of Act 2, you don't really need the wheels. The loom finally fixed in patch 1.05. By the way, if it's not fixed for you, you have to start a new game so that patches can be applied. Please keep that in mind. But the loom is finally fixed. And do you need the loom? Yes, you definitely want the loom. It's like a must-have item for the weaver slash tailor. But here's the thing, this is one of the items you only need as much as you have weavers slash tailors on the map. And when you have reached the national maximum on those buildings, then you don't need the loom anymore because it is literally only usable for that specific building, and you only put it in as a supply, which means you only need it once. So craft like 8 or 10 pieces and then you are done with it. It's as easy as that. Candles. Candles are interesting at the beginning for religion, and they give you a little bit of knowledge, right? So they are nice to have, but don't overdo it. Like if you have one building which is producing a few candles, like 50 or even 100 candles, you will never completely use them. Like I haven't produced candles in 200 turns or more, and you can still see I'm still having tons of candles. So yeah, they're not really that important if you're not focusing on religion. If you are going down the road of like mass religion buildings and all that, you want the candle. Get the candle. Do it. We already talked about the rope, right? Important at the beginning and then phases out. We have the plow. I always want to say plow. It's plow. We have the plow, and then, of course, the heavy plows. And super duper important, right? Must have item. You put this on every farm, and you would not get the heavy plow upgrade till the high medieval era. So you will actually stick around that plow for quite some time. So get that. And the moment you can actually upgrade to the heavy plows, you do so. You don't need the plows anymore. Like, there's no reason to keep them around. Lampposts give you city build production plus 10, 15 city security. Comes in a little bit late. For the stats it gives you, it comes a little bit late, and it might not be good for your city because, well, it doesn't do much, right? You can see right here I have the lamppost active in Lommel, and I have still 0 security here because I have put no effort whatsoever into it. Again, comes in very late. If you have a free slot, you want to get that 10% city build production and maybe the security, sure, if you have the amenity slot open, but look, don't overdo it, right? If you ignore it, your game will be fine. The telescope. Well, you literally need one telescope because you put that into the observatory and you can only build one observatory. Keep that in mind, right now at least. And that's that. Yes, you can use it as an amenity, but I don't know. The 5+ research is nice to have, but I wouldn't put like a lot of production into it. Like I always feel like the moment you get the telescope and you have actually a good amount of telescopes you can use in your city, you don't really need that anymore. You probably already have so much research coming from your city directly that it doesn't really make that much of a difference, right? Metal pots. Yes, yes, you want metal pots. They will be around for quite some time. You don't have to produce as much as I do. Like you can see, I have far too many. And I like to put them into every house. And I also love to use it as an amenity because it helps for growth and it gives you also some money if you need that. Well, prosperity, right? Same thing in the end. And you don't need 500 pieces. Ignore the number here. I produced far too many metal pots and you can slow that down. But they can be very helpful at the beginning and you should definitely get them. They're great. Light bulbs, they're basically an upgrade to the candle. I completely forgot to mention that. And you can only, well, they're actually not an upgrade to the candle. Sorry, that's me mistaken. They're an upgrade to the candle in the houses. That was my mistake. And, sorry, no, they are useless. You get them far too late. They give you only 3 city knowledge, and that's 1 city knowledge more than you get from a candle. Why would I put production into that? And you don't use it for anything else. So, sorry, this thing is just, why ever that exists, it needs an upgrade. We already talked about gears. Computers, yes, you want computers. You need them as a supply. You need them to train certain units. And you can also see as an amenity, they give you knowledge. Again, comes in late, the city production. You get 5 city production per science improvement. So if you have a city with a lot of science, this is another huge boost to the city production. But even if you don't use it as an amenity, you want to use it as a supply, and you definitely want to use it for your units you want to train. So get the computers. Please keep in mind, building a computer takes a lot of parts you have to assemble first, so get that going. The television. Man, I'm always torn with the television. As a supply for the houses, yes. As an amenity, the minus 5% city production is what irks me, and they are just better items to get up the city happiness without the downside. So, as a supply, if you have one workshop slash factory producing televisions, it should be alright, but I would never use it really as an amenity. Again, they are better items just to get the city happiness up. We already talked about the barrels. Commercial drone, 5% city production. Comes in super late, and this is why I'm like, I don't really think it's that important. AI assistant, same thing. It's coming in far too late. Like, this is one of the last things you will build, and you were probably pretty close to the end of the game at this point. This thing is just too late. Like, the stats you are getting are nice, but they're literally a water drop in the desert. Like, at this point, it doesn't really matter anymore. The furniture. Yes. Yes, you do. Put that into every house. If you just have one building which is producing the furniture, especially at the beginning, then you are good. You can stop that at some point. Like, I'm just letting it run because I'm lazy. You don't need that many furniture, but put the furniture into every house because there's not really much else you can put there. So get at least one. All right. Last, but certainly not least, are electronics. Yes, they come in late, but they are being used in so many endgame items. You can see it where you're putting electronics in when it comes to crafting, for construction, what you are training with, and you can also use it as an amenity, which, by the way, is really good if you still need knowledge. If you are already down to like 2 or 3 turns for research, you don't really need that. You will probably want to use it for all the other things. But this is another must-have item. like 100%, but it comes in pretty late. It's the end game must-have items, right? Like glass is the must-have item right from the get-go, and electronics is basically later on. But that was the factory list. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like. And also, if you're new to the channel, I would appreciate if you might consider to subscribe for more ARA videos and, more importantly, more strategy games, because that's what we are focusing on here in general. With that said, have a good one. Stay safe. Bye-bye.